Welcome to the Shroud of Turin exhibition. The exhibition tells the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The New Testament of the Bible teaches us that Jesus was crucified on Good Friday. After he was taken down from the cross, he was wrapped in a linen shroud and laid in a stone tomb with a rock at the entrance. On Easter Sunday, Jesus' followers, who were eyewitnesses, said that he rose from the dead and came back to life. They saw him, touched him, and ate meals with him. Jesus had told them that he would rise from the dead. He also said, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. The exhibition tells this gospel story of Jesus using replicas of the Shroud of Turin as a visual aid. The photographs were taken by Barry Schwartz, who was the official photographer of the Shroud of Turin research project, also called STURP, in 1978. The real shroud is kept in a bomb-proof case in the city of Turin in North Italy. It is a 4.4 metre long linen cloth, and it shows the front and the back of a crucified man. Many Christians believe the Shroud of Turin is the actual cloth Jesus was buried in because it is so mysterious and we can't make anything like it today. One of the first things you will notice is lots of burn marks on the shroud. It was in a terrible fire in 1532, and they managed to save it by pouring water over it. This will be important when we look at the radiocarbon date. In the centre of the shroud is the image of the man who has been crucified. There are two colours: the colour of the image of the man, which is very faint, and the colour of his blood, which is a rich carmine red. We don't know the colour of his hair or beard, and we don't know the colour of his skin. In 1898, a man named Secondo Pia photographed the shroud for the first time. In those days, to make a photograph, you had to first create a negative plate where light and dark is reversed. When Secondo Pia looked at his negative plate, he realised he could see the face and the body much more clearly. This is not something that happens with normal art. John Jackson and Eric Jumper, in 1976, discovered the shroud has three-dimensional properties, so it was created while it was draped over a three-dimensional figure. In 1978, STURP scientists were allowed 5 days to examine the shroud. They could not find any evidence of paint or dye in the creation of the image of the man, but they confirmed that the blood is blood. In the Bible, we learn Jesus suffered to save us from our sins and the things we have done wrong. He had many injuries. St. John reports that one of the officials interrogating Jesus slapped him in the face. On the right cheek of the man of the shroud, there is a large bruise. Pilate's soldiers put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff. There are many blood flows to the head, particularly on the back of the head, which were probably created by a deep crown or a cap of thorns. Scientists have identified pollen from this area, which comes from a plant called Gundelia tourneforti, which has a vicious thorn. The text of John's Gospel reports that Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. There are multiple contusions, which look like a dumbbell, which go all over the body of the man of the shroud. There is even a whip mark on the right cheek. The Bible tells us Jesus carried his cross, and the whip marks which are clear on the back are smudged across the shoulders. The right shoulder is severely dislocated, and the knees appear to be bruised. Scientists examining the shroud found dirt on the soles of the feet, on the knees, and on the tip of the nose, which suggests he fell. All the Gospels of the New Testament tell us Jesus was crucified. The man of the shroud has clearly been crucified because there are wounds to his hands and to his feet. These are consistent with recent archaeological findings of crucifixion. After he rose from the dead, Luke's Gospel teaches us that Jesus showed his disciples his hands and his feet. The man of the shroud also has a flow of blood from the right side, which appears on the left on the shroud because the shroud lay on top of the body. St. John wrote this: "When they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe. A week after his resurrection, Jesus said to another of his disciples, St. Thomas, "Put your fingers here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." In the exhibition, there's a crown of thorns, a replica flagrum, 1st century Roman nails, and a spear, so that you can see the types of weapons the Romans used. There is also a replica of the Sudarium of Oviedo and the Holy Blood of Bruges. The Sudarium is believed to be the napkin which was around Jesus' head, and blood flows around the mouth and head match the shroud. The Holy Blood could be one of the strips of linen described by St. John, and the blood has the same red coloration. If the shroud is not the burial cloth of Jesus, what is it? Who made it? Where, when, and how? There are no satisfactory answers to those questions. In 1988, a corner of the shroud was radiocarbon dated, and it seemed to give a date of 1260 to 1390, meaning the shroud material is medieval and could not have wrapped Jesus. However, raw data from the sample, released in 2017, shows the radiocarbon date is not definitive. It is likely that after the 1532 fire and the Daswater damage, the shroud needed repair. Sue Benford and Joe Marino showed photographs of the sample area to textile experts, and they all said it looked like it was repaired. One of the STURP scientists, Ray Rogers, tested the same fibres and found madder root dye and a sticky gum like gum tragacanth used to stick the dye to the fibres. He also found cotton thread glued into the material. Photographs taken by Oxford University and analysed by Irish textile expert Donna Campbell found that the sample they tested had been stitched, repaired and dyed. In 1698 it was repaired by the Oratorian priest Blessed Sebastian Valfrey. 16th, 17th or 19th century contaminants would make the cloth appear much more modern. Blessed Sebastian believed the shroud was Jesus' winding cloth. He said, "The cross received the living Jesus and gave him back to us dead. The shroud received the dead Jesus and restored him to us alive." Another important question is, how was the image on the shroud created? We simply don't know. It's not paint or dye or a scorch or a photograph. The image does not penetrate the cloth. It sits on the surface of the fibres and is measured in nanometers. Physicists think the shroud was created by some form of radiation or light. Paolo de Lazzaro, head of science at Turin, and his team of nuclear physicists managed to change the surface of some fibres to make them look something like the shroud fibres. They used ultraviolet lasers. What about history? If the Shroud of Turin wrapped Jesus, where has it been for 2,000 years? Well, it's been in Turin, Italy for over 400 years. Before that, it was shown in Liry, France in 1355. The historian Ian Wilson has argued that the shroud was once known as the Holy Mandelion, which was discovered hidden in the city of Edessa in modern Syria in 525 AD. There is a legend in the city of Edessa that King Abgar V wrote to Jesus and received a reply. He was healed of a sickness after he was later given a cloth containing an image of Jesus which was described as not made by hands. 6th century art depicting Jesus created after the discovery of the Holy Mandelion looks very similar to the image on the shroud. The Holy Mandelion arrived in Constantinople in 944 AD, seen here in an illuminated history by John Skylitzes. The Skylitzes Chronicle also shows the arrival of the letter of Jesus to Abgar V in 1031. One of its most beautiful images may illustrate the carrying of the Holy Mandelion in a litany procession in 1036. The Shroud of Turin was once folded into four when it was damaged by incense, which would fit this image. The text says the illumination describes an event in 820 AD, but the army is the Varangian Guard, known by their distinctive axes, who arrived in the city 168 years later in 988 AD. So who is right, the scribe or the artist? The shroud stayed in Constantinople until 1204 AD, when the city was sacked. It was then taken by the Crusaders to France. The Shroud of Turin is an incredible artefact. Barry Schwartz describes it as the single most studied artefact in history, and yet we still don't know how the image was made. What really matters about the shroud, though, is what it tells us about Jesus, what it can teach us about how he was crucified, and the light it sheds on the bigger questions. Did Jesus rise from the dead? Is there life after death? Can we still see his face, the world's first selfie? These are the questions which really matter. Jesus said, "Who do you say I am?" to his disciples. St. Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." If Jesus asked you that question today, what would you say?